Right now, I am in the Ardennes forest, just to the east of Bastogne. And in the last episode, we were in Clairvaux, and we're talking about the 28th Infantry Division, nicknamed the Bloody Bucket, and how on the 16th of December of 1944, they found themselves right in the path of a juggernaut, as the German 5th Panzer Army just slammed right into them on their way to the west, to the Bastogne crossroads in what they called Operation Watch on the Rhine. In the middle was the 110th Regiment under the command of Colonel Hurley Fuller. And the 110th and 112th and the 109th, these regiments of the 28th Infantry Division held on as long as they could. The Germans are going all around them, but eventually they had to fall back to the position close to where I am right now. And the fight that was going to happen right around here was going to be about as vicious as it gets. As I mentioned, we are to the east of Bastogne. And I've mentioned before how when people think of the Battle of the Bulge, Bastogne gets a whole lot of attention. And the siege that happened there with the 101st Airborne and the 10th Armored Division. Well, the perimeter at Bastogne didn't just magically appear. There were some divisions that paid a heavy price to hold off the Germans until the 10th Armored and the 101st could get there. And a lot of their efforts have gone largely unrecognized. I'm heading to a monument now that is literally in the middle of nowhere. As you can see, like I'm on this logging road. There's a deer stand right behind me. And like I couldn't even get my car through here because it was about to get hung up. But anyway, we're going to talk about some of these lesser known actions that contributed greatly to the defense of Bastogne. Well, right out here, off in the middle of nowhere, is a monument to one of the unsung units of the Battle of the Bulge, the 9th Armored Division. So when the attack from the Germans kicked off on the 16th, the 9th Armored was one of the closest units that Troy Middleton had on hand to send out to try and help stave off this massive offensive that the Germans had kicked off. So you got the 28th that is holding off the best they can and falling back, and the 9th is sent up to try and guard a few crossroads that are close to here. So you can see here on this memorial, I really like this. They like have these tank treads that form this outer shell of the memorial. And in the 9th Armored Division, you had what was called Combat Command Reserve, or CCR, that was sent out. So on December the 17th, two different task force in CCR, Task Force Rose was sent to a place called Antoniushof, which is just a short distance from here. And then Task Force Harper, which was under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Harper, was sent to the nearby Feitch crossroads. And they were going to get hit hard by the 2nd Panzer Division. So on the morning of December 18th, the German recon units of the 2nd Panzer Division reached Antoniushof. There was a bitter fight that took place there, and they were overwhelmed. And then, well, the 2nd Panzer turned and started heading for Feitch. From up here, we can get a decent view of the battlefield in this area. So again, you've got Task Force Rose off in Antoniushof, which is back in this direction. Task Force Rose gets overwhelmed, and then the 2nd Panzer is going to come all the way down here until they get to this crossroads in the distance at Feitch. And Task Force Harper had set up a roadblock there. By the time the Germans got there, it was getting late in the evening and was getting dark. And they get into a fight with the men of the 9th Armored. The first tank gets hit and blows up and catches fire, and that illuminates everything around there. And the Germans just started picking these poor guys off. Harper ended up being killed in the engagement, if I remember correctly. And then after the Germans pushed through there, well, then they turned and started heading for the next village of Allerborn, which is where the 28th Division, 110th Infantry Regiment, had their new headquarters or command post set up. Well, I've now moved down to the village of Allerborn, and right off here in the distance, well, this is where the crossroads at Feitch was, where Task Force Harper was set up. So after the German 2nd Panzer moves through the crossroads, well, they turned west, and these old boys are headed for Bastogne. And something that's actually pretty crazy that was aiding them is they had like a primitive form of night vision that they were using. So these guys kind of owned the night. They had like this infrared technology. Again, it was very primitive, but yeah, pretty wild that they had that technology right here during this battle. There were some of the Panthers that were set up with it. Well, in Allerborn, right here in this house, well, this served as the command post for the 110th Infantry Regiment. Colonel Fuller had disappeared. He had withdrawn from Clairvaux, was moving on foot. He had actually been captured, but high command didn't know that. So command of the 110th Regiment passed off to a guy by the name of Colonel Ted Seeley. And again, he had his command post right here. And these guys were about ready to go through an ordeal. Now, even though Task Force Harper had been wrecked right up here at the crossroads, the men back here at the 110th Command Post didn't exactly know specifically what was going on. You have to keep in mind it's nighttime. You've also got the fog of war that's going on. And as Seeley is in his command post here, there's a soldier who comes running down the road and bursts in through the door, and he says there's a German tank that's headed right this way. So Seeley walks out. He's got a cigarette dangling from his mouth. And he looks down the road and listens, and he said, "Are you sure it didn't sound like a German tank to him?" The soldier said, "All I know is it's a tank and it's shooting our guys." Well, turns out it was an American Sherman tank that had been captured by the Germans and came right up here. The guys dodge back in the house. The tank stops, it turns its turret right to the house and then blasts an armor-piercing round into it that shoots entirely through the house. Seeley and a couple of the other guys, some of them had escaped and got out of here. Seeley was not one of them. He goes down into the cellar with a few other men. And behind this Sherman tank are 11 Panzer Mark IVs. The Sherman moves on, and then one by one, each one of these Panzers stop, turn their turret, and blast into this house. Well, behind the tanks were some German half-tracks with German soldiers. So they check up here. There was a Jeep that had been left by Task Force Harper right out front here. And Seeley and the guys that were with him were looking for an opportunity to try and grab that Jeep. Well, one of the Germans shines his light into the doorway and sees these men, and they end up getting captured. So in just a short period of time, the 110th Infantry Regiment had 2 different commanders, and both of them had been captured by the Germans. And for the 2nd Panzer, well, they were continuing on to the west, headed for Bastogne.
The 10th Armored Division sent 2 of its combat commands northwest of Luxembourg to go into action there, and they sent my combat command west to Ardennes and then on to north to Bastogne. I preceded my outfit into Bastogne and got into Bastogne about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and found General Middleton. General Middleton asked me how my outfit fought and how many pieces my outfit would fight in. I told him 3. He said, all right, send 1 to Noville, which is 6 or 7 kilometers north, 1 east to Longville, and 1 southeast to Bras. Cherry, who's not here, went out to Longville, came back at midnight, and found me asleep. He asked that he be allowed to sit on a road out east of Mageret, short of Longville, because he had found a combat command, CCR, of the 9th Armored Division in position. 10 or 12 tanks, a colonel, and some artillery. I gave him permission to stay where he was. Cherry never got back to his command. In the meantime, some of the Panzer Division had cut in behind his outfit at Mageret, and he never joined. However, his headquarters went into the little Neffy Chateau. At Neffy Chateau, Cherry had a tank or 2 and a few machine guns and his whole headquarters company, and he put up a real nice fight all day.
We've moved just to the west of the town of Longville, and by Monday the 18th, there was another armored division that had come online, the 10th Armored Division. And there were 3 teams that got deployed to the east of Bastogne to try and help plug these gaps. So basically divisions and units are arriving and they're just getting thrown into the fight. So with the 10th Armored, there were 3 different teams named after their commanders. There was Team O'Hara, which got deployed kind of to the south. Team de Sabri, which got deployed to the north, headed towards a place called Noville. And right here, along this route right here, was Team Cherry. Now, just to orient you as to where we are, we're facing west right here. The next village over is Mageret. I think that's how you pronounce that. And then off to the east here is the town of Longville. So Team Cherry, led by a guy named Henry Cherry, with the 10th Armored, made their way down this route right here and got just to the west of Longville, and were having some problems because as they were moving to the east, you have guys from the 9th Armored who are moving to the west. There are all kinds of broken down vehicles that are jamming up the road, and it's just a little bit of a mess. Now, you've got the 2nd Panzer behind them. There's another German unit that is coming online that is kind of moving up a little bit to the south of us. And they circled up. This was Panzer Lehr under Fritz Bayerlein. as Team Cherry is moving up here, Panzerlehr is going to come up from the south and come around them and come up into Mageret. They had been slowed down a little bit because they had taken a little bit of a side route that ended up being a dirt path and they got bogged down. But anyway, they pop out to the west right here. You've got 2nd Panzer over here, and these guys are trapped in between. And the first vehicle and the last vehicle in the column got picked off, and then there was just one heck of a firefight that happened. Well, this place right here is called St. Michael's Grotto. It's a Catholic shrine that existed at the time of the battle and looked very much like it does today. And as the Germans are pouring fire into this column, well, this is kind of a little bit of a place of refuge. You can see we've got high ground over here. We've got high ground over here. So there would have been a lot of bullets and a lot of artillery that was flying around this area. And if we walk over here, well, you can see some evidence of the battle and these little nicks and dings all along this structure. So if we go over here, I think this is another one that we are looking at. Another spot right there. In his book Alamo in the Ardennes, John McManus talks about the fight that happens here, and he tells the story of a guy, I think his name was Weichert, if I remember right, who got out of his truck and was standing by a tree very close to this position when a round strikes the tree above him, and then everything just kind of goes black for him. And he said that when he came to, he thought he felt a German tickling him on the back of his neck with a bayonet. Got to looking, and there was no German. And the tickling on the back of his neck turned out to be his arm. His arm had broken and had flipped around behind his neck, and it was his quivering fingers that were tickling him. But anyway, yeah. So in the effort to fight off the Germans so that a perimeter could be formed around Bastogne, there was a lot of fighting that took place right here along this road. We've moved a little bit further west into the town of Mageret, and again, I think that I'm pronouncing that correctly. I could absolutely be wrong. If we want to just go with the American Midwestern redneck version, it's Mageret. But anyway, this is the town that Fritz Bayerlein and Panzerlehr popped out into, and in retrospect, I'll bet that they were wishing that they had just made a drive on to Bastogne, but they had got some information from a local villager that they had seen a big American column that had moved through here, which would have been Team Cherry from the 10th Armored. So naturally, that would cause somebody to check up. So Bayerlein didn't want to get in a situation where he had a large American column that was behind him that could potentially cause problems. But anyway, here in the village, well, they have a memorial in the form of this tank turret right here, which is pretty cool. That's actually a tractor that's going by right now, not a tank. But they also have this information board that shows some photos of the aftermath of the battle. And from these we can get an idea of just the cauldron that these guys got thrown into, with Germans surrounding them on all sides. So here's one showing some American tanks just at the edge of Longville. Here's an artist depiction of all of the destroyed tanks outside of town. More destroyed vehicles between Longville and Mageret. And then really, what's really sad about all of these stories, no matter where you go, is how the civilians and the towns are affected. So here you see this destroyed church, and then again more destroyed vehicles. Another Sherman right here, and then this is from another village, but a drawing showing locals in a cellar hiding from the violence that is occurring outside of their home. But yeah, that's how they remember the battle here in Mageret. We've now made our way to the outskirts of Bastogne, and I thought it would only be appropriate to end this right here by this monument to Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, which arrived here on December 18th of 1944, was the first major combat unit to get in here and defend Bastogne. Now, for Team Cherry, elements of them made their way back to Bastogne. There was another larger element that swung north and linked up with the 101st Airborne around Bizery. And that would be the end of one ordeal and the beginning of another for these guys. But this was a team effort, and the defense of Bastogne couldn't have been possible without the bravery and the sacrifice of the men from the 28th Infantry Division and the 9th Armored.